Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the GeekWave. This is the low-budget show. It's the show so low. It's the 1970s. We're in the Australian outback, and you're going to get a couple of your best friends together, and we're going to make the best damn podcast of all time that becomes one of the top podcasts of all time. And then in a couple more decades, we're going to head down the Fury Road and make our magnum opus that might be the best film ever made. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do in this episode of the GeekWave. We're just going to, defy expectations, start off with no budget, and then in a couple decades have all the budget we need to make the best damn podcast of all time. Because today we're talking about the career and the films of George Miller, who I could sit here and argue has the best run of all time in terms of filmography. I mean that honestly. I look at his list, I don't think there is a bad film in there. We'll get into it. Fascinating. I love him. This was going to happen. There's also going to be the 3,000 Years of Longing review attached to this, so if you haven't seen my review of this film on YouTube, you can listen to it on here. It'll be the very last thing you hear after we talk about every other movie in this man's filmography. But before we dive into the madness that is this beautiful son of a gun, we are going to talk about a bit of news. A lot of news that kind of has to do with the future of the industry of cinema, ? All these things are kind of connected in a very sad, scary way. So the first thing I do want to talk about is it looks like the same way that Apple TV is developing a Godzilla series over on Apple, that Disney Plus will get the streaming rights to a King Kong television series. Very fascinating that both of those projects are happening at different streaming services, and that is it connected to like the MonsterVerse stuff? Because that's still technically owned at this moment in time by Warner Brothers. Fascinating. Utterly fascinating. So I have a lot of thoughts on King Kong. One of my favorite franchises of all time, one of my favorite character and concepts of all time. And it's just one of those things that the moment it gets into the hands of Disney, it really feels like it loses some of its nostalgia, some of its fun. It's kind of how I feel about a lot of these bigger budget things we're getting from Disney now, where I'm like, cool, you can do another Pinocchio movie, but should you? Is that worth it? So far not, in my opinion. And just the fact that we're actually headed to Disney to do this, it does worry me. It does upset me. It makes me just go, do we not have any other parties at Warner Brothers willing to try this? Do we have to branch it off? And that leads into another topic. Actually, I was going to save this one for last, but we'll talk about it now, because this is, I also think is like a career-changing thing happening in the industry right now if this goes through. It looks like Warner Brothers Discovery, the piece of shit that is that company these days, is getting rid of Legendary, their ties to Legendary, which is a great studio. They have produced some of the most insanely good films of the past couple of years, like the MonsterVerse stuff, like the Dune movie. And you have to ask yourself, how in the ever-loving hell, how does that company, Warner Brothers, be like, nah, we can't do it? Why are they getting rid of Legendary? This is so concerning to me because, again, it's like they're selling off all their assets. If they get rid of Legendary, you know that Paramount or Universal is going to swoop in there and buy those up. This is such a terrifying thing in the industry. And I talk about this every week. I know I do. But so much news just keeps coming out about it. It's terrifying that this idea just can exist, that like a legacy studio from like the 20s and 30s and 40s could just go away overnight and just be bought by this huge stupid conglomerate bullshit, and they get rid of all their stuff that's good. Like, could you imagine being the company that owns the streaming selling rights to Godzilla and King Kong and being like, we don't know how to make that work, we got to get rid of it? Like, how do you do Godzilla realistically these days? It is insane to me. They're still currently filming the 5th installment of the MonsterVerse saga. They have not confirmed the title. I am so worried about that film. I feel like that is going to be the last of the Hail Marys for that genre, and then a hard reboot coming very soon after. Maybe these shows on Apple and on Disney are going to change the game. But let's just say I want to save this topic for another day. Let's just say for a minute that King Kong no longer is a part of Warner Brothers. Like, they move it to a whole other thing. Say Disney buys it. Could we realistically live in a universe where it's Planet of the Apes Skull Island? The Island of the Apes, and it's just Skull Island, and we're just following the apes on... I'm getting too ahead of myself here, but that would be really cool, wouldn't it? A literal game-changing thing that could happen. But I cannot believe that. Dune is an award-winning film. Why would you think to get rid of the studio and the company that helped usher that into existence? Unreal. But that's not the end of the Warner Brothers talk right now, folks, because after much search for somebody, a lot of names going about, and I'm not kidding when I say this name is the biggest surprise this company has announced, I think, since this whole involvement. You know, Zaslav has said he needs his Kevin Feige. He needs his guy. That could be Kevin Feige. So he's looking far and wide for a producer that works at WB. He landed on Dan Lin. Now, I'm of two thoughts on this. First off, Dan Lin is a good producer. He's produced the Lego films. He has done a lot of the bigger blockbuster stuff at Warner Brothers. And the thing is, I think it's the most important to look at the Lego films because those have this big nostalgia push behind them, which is kind of what they want from DC. They want things to feel like their connective tissued universe. So he's a good choice. I really like that. The unfortunate thing is he is now entering a position where he's going to be compared from day one to the most successful studio head in all of history. Like, the fact that he has to essentially do what Kevin Feige did over 15 years in the span of one is almost unheard of and unrealistic, to the point where he might actually lose a lot of stuff in that. But my goodness, cool. I think he's an interesting guy. I can't wait to see if he gets the job and if he does something special with it. The other thought I have with this, and I'm sorry I have to say this, but I think it's a very important thing to say because it is a noticeable thing happening with this company right now where they have fired a lot of people, or laid off, I should say. They laid off a bunch of people working at the Oprah Winfrey Network who were African American. They have clearly been canceling certain projects or certain types of leads. And the fact that they're giving their Kevin Feige role to an Asian American man does spark me as like, it's either like a reactionary tale from Zaslav to be like, see, I'm not racist. Like, we have an Asian Kevin Feige. And I hate that I have to say that, but that's just where like this whole situation has gotten to at this point. That's how it feels. I personally think Dan Lin is the right man for the job. I do. I think there's might be other producers in there with more experience and more capable hands, but you need somebody who understands today's audience, and I feel like this guy could definitely do something that a Zaslav couldn't. So I'm hoping Zaslav's like, we got the right man for this job, and it's not like, we're not racist. Look, our Kevin Feige is this. I hope it's the latter, but I don't know anymore. It very worries me. Very worries me. Oh, man. That old company is a shit show, and it's breaking my heart to see it every day. It is. Like, it's killing Hollywood. Honestly, it is. But let's take a break, and when we come back from that break, we're actually going to jump into the most insane filmmaker of all time, ? Hey, we just came back from the break. I do want to clarify something about our last topic that I was doing a little more research on. It looks like Legendary is also deciding to do it. It doesn't look like it's solely like a Discovery Warner Brothers thing. It looks like Legendary is like, we're actually making films. We don't want to be associated with you. We're going to go over here, hopefully get Sony or Paramount to come swoop us up and we can work with them. Good for them. Mad respect for that entire team and the entire creative board behind all of that. Awesome. You guys are going to win. You know who else is winning at life? This 77-year-old man who has somehow put a chokehold over the film industry and shown a bunch of little pansy-ass kids how you make the most insane films ever made. And this is the thing. We've talked about Nolan, and we've talked about Edgar Wright, and we talked about Audrey Hepburn, and I love all those creators. But if I were to look at like one of those people that I've talked about and just be like, they've made some duds, I could say that honestly and earnestly. I cannot for the life of me, and I will stand by this. You don't have to agree with me. You could not agree with me, and I could completely understand. I will stand by the fact that George Miller is one of the few directors who has not had a bad apple in the run. There's some weird ones, some interesting ones that don't work every second, but none of them are fully shit, if that makes sense. They're all competent films, well executed, and beautifully made. And here's the thing, I just love this about George Miller. He is just a guy who was just living in Australia. He's like, I just want to make a film with my bros. We're going to make a really stupid movie in the 70s. It's going to be called Mad Max. We're going to make Mel Gibson a star, and we're going to launch one of the most intense franchises ever made. And that's insane. That is like unheard of. And this is the other thing too that's like both true and false of today's era, where it's like, you know, anybody can be a filmmaker today. You have a phone with a camera in it. You have access to great technology to edit and film and use shit. And you can just make whatever you want and do everything. And that is cool. But sometimes, too, you have to have like a certain flair to you that just makes things work. And I think George Miller is the perfect example of, okay, I know how to make a film look like a film. I know how to make it act like a film. How it just works, right? He knows how to do all of that, and it's kind of exciting. And then he's just like, I also know how to make it insane and unheard of and crazy and intense without the things that people use today. Like this, we're talking about like 80s and 90s films that are still fascinating and almost like how would you, on a small budget, even make some of the films he's made today? That is insane and crazy, and I love it, and I love him for it. I just love the one-upmanship he has for his himself, where he's like, I can do this movie better again. There's something kind of humbling about that. He gives off this vibe of a guy that's like, I don't really have to prove to the world I can do this or don't. I know I can, so I'm just going to play by my own rules, make things my own way, not worry about what other people think about my work. You know? Because the thing is, when we talk more about the list, I'm just going to say this because I stand by it. I know certain people in my life that I couldn't recommend a single one of his films to because they wouldn't get it, because they couldn't handle it. And I mean that for every one of his films, not just like the Mad Max stuff. I know people that would not understand what Lorenzo's Oil is really doing in terms of cinema. They'd understand the story, but like the craftsmanship and the intensity behind it, there's some insane shit in Lorenzo's Oil. It's really weird, but we'll get into that in a minute here. I just love this guy. He's just like your favorite grandpa who shows up with his big glasses with the strings on it, the cool scarves and leather jackets. Just like a badass dude. I love that. I love that he just doesn't care. And there's a huge quote he talks about his personal life, which I think is very endearing about a lot of his work. He's like, I've gone from being very male dominant to being surrounded by magnificent women. I can't help but be a feminist, because I'd say the last two films he's made are very evocative of that feeling, where he's like, yeah, screw it, man. I don't know. Look, I made Mel Gibson. I gave the world Mel Gibson for better or ill. There he is. You have him now. And then he's just like, here you go. Charlize Theron. Look at her. I love that. It's crazy. So should we get into it? Should we dive into the world of George Miller, the insanity that is this man's career? Because honestly, there is nothing like it. Every one of these films is just kind of like twisted in a weird way. And I guess we have to start with the Mad Max movies, because that is what he did. He made the first Mad Max film in 1979, which is fine. I would say out of all of his films, it is the one that's like, this is a filmmaker just starting to make films. It's not like an intensity. It's not crazy. He's just, I have a story. I can't really get myself to execute it yet. So we're going to just do it a certain way, see how it looks. And it's pretty fun. It's a cool looking film. It's got cool cars. It's got cool concepts. And it, of course, gives us Mel Gibson. And I mean, is anybody here is anybody really a fan of Mel Gibson anymore? I know he was like the biggest shit for a moment, but that's kind of impressive that like George Miller's just like, this guy has a really interesting look to him. And that's the kind of look that you put on a screen, and then everyone's like, no, that is the kind of look you have for a filmmaker. That man is a filmmaker. He is perfection in a bottle. We're going to put him in everything throughout the 80s and 90s, and then we're going to realize, oh, maybe he's not the best guy, and then just let it go. I think that is insane. Like, Mad Max is such a weird movie to like start your career on, and then when you get to The Road Warrior, it's even weirder because it's just, how do you make that movie next? And also, how is that kind of a follow-up to the first one? And those of you who don't know, you might be like, wait, isn't Mad Max always like in the desert? Not really. The first Mad Max film, it's kind of just like in suburbia, but then when you get to The Road Warrior, you're like, oh, society has collapsed. We're in the Australian outback. There's factions fighting for water and gasoline. Everybody is dressed up like some BDSM bullshit monsters with really stupid names, just crawling over vehicles, attacking things. There's one guy who flies in the sky, and then we just have Mel Gibson being the only holdover from the previous movie, and now he has a dog, and he's got like a thing on his leg because he hurt his leg in the first movie, and he's just, you know, the badass in the desert. And you're just like, what a huge jump in story. It is just awesome, and it's one of those movies that you look at it on paper, and you're like, this is just kind of insane. And then you watch the film, and there's just something so special about having that aesthetic work so perfectly. It's a hard movie to show people when you explain it to them. You're like, yeah, so it's like the desert. It's all these people fighting for this stuff. There's like this society that's like being attacked by these people, and Mel Gibson comes in, he has to protect them. It sounds pretty simple. It kind of sounds westerny, and that's kind of the feel. But then you just look like, oh, they're just wearing insane, stupid clothing. Everyone's screaming at each other. They have the dumbest names in the world. None of it makes any real sense. The lead character hardly says a word. He's grunting. He's growling. They're running around, climbing on cars, just being these insane people, doing insane shit. And part of you's like, how is this working so well? That's the other thing about this career that just amazes me and astonishes me, is how well every piece fits into the machine. Like, this is a film that really shows you, if you give him any crazy concept, he can spin it into gold. Like, it's insane. And the fact that he can take this film, The Road Warrior, and top himself later, holy shit, that is incredible. That is incredible. Look, I am a huge fan of The Road Warrior. That is one of my favorite films. If you are a writer and you want to know how to like pass story in terms of like a screen, it's one of those films I always tell people, like, just watch the subtlety of everything happening. There's no wasted space. There's no nuance to it. It's just, we're in a moment. Everything is happening as it should play out. There's no subtlety. You're just watching these people exist in this society. And it's just like this really fucked up society. And that is really cool to see. And it's such a beautiful concept. And it makes for great storytelling. And then, you know, he does a segment in the Twilight Zone movie, which I don't really want to spend too much time dwelling on because he just did a segment. It's kind of like for a work for hire thing because he really wanted to make another Mad Max. And it's an interesting thing. There's a lot of like shit involved when it comes to like, you know, the Twilight Zone movie. There's literal people dying on set and stuff. But it's a fascinating film. A really interesting idea that they portray, getting like those big named filmmakers to like come in and see what they can do. You look at some of those names, you're like, how did they get Landis and Spielberg and Dante and Miller to come in? Very weird. He does the segment Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. It is fine. It's the worst part of his career. I think this and the next one I think are the worst of his career. But I would never say they're bad. They're just like, whatever. Because you have two major successes in the first two Mad Maxes, okay? Very independent film is the first Mad Max. He gets more money. They tell him to do The Road Warrior. Everyone's like, what are you doing? This is insane and weird. Why is that guy not wearing any clothes? Huge hit. And then the studio, it's the classic tale you hear all the time. First movie does well. Studio gives you more money to do something. The second time does even better. The third time, the studio something like, okay, now we got to reel you in a little bit. So Beyond Thunderdome, is an interesting film. It's okay. It's not bad by any means. He definitely felt like, okay, I don't really get to play all the strengths I want to. But Tina Turner, man, ho boy, that is an intense performance. She's fantastic in it. And again, it's the least memorable. You just remember like Turner and the name Thunderdome. But come on, the Road Warrior is such a great name, a great fucking name. And Beyond Thunderdome, that name rocks too. Those are such good names, and I love them so much. Like strong, powerful, intense names. So cool. It's the least interesting of his work, in my opinion, because it's kind of like a rehash doing something new. But it's still interesting and good. And that is like, what an impressive first three like full movies where he does an entire trilogy of Mad Max films. There's nothing in between them. Twilight Zone's in between them, but that's not really his movie. Where does he go from there? Well, he has a couple things he wants to make, but you've got to kind of like play the system a little bit. So he makes one of my favorite dark comedies ever. I absolutely love The Witches of Eastwick. This is one that he didn't write or produce. It's just kind of one he took as for like the directing job. This film, if you haven't seen it, I just want to lay the groundwork for you a little bit. You have these three witches living in today's climatey world, being these sexy sons of guns. Cher at the height of her beauty, Susan Sarandon at the height of her beauty, and Michelle Pfeiffer at the height of her beauty. These beautiful, angelic women, they're witches. They're all kind of like, so we want to have a baby, all of us collectively. We want to make the perfect man who could give us a baby. So they make a sculpture of a man with a huge man thing, a giant-sized man thing, if you will, and they accidentally summon Jack Nicholson as the devil. I love this film so much. It is so funny, so engaging, and it does this thing. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this. This is like a weird place to bring up this topic, and I kind of want to do a whole video talking about it, actually. It does this thing that I love that we don't see anymore in big budgeted films being released by studios anymore. We don't have horny films anymore. You know, like our modern films that are big budget, distributed by these people, they're not horny, you know? Back in the day, even a little bit of like Beyond Thunderdome and The Road Warrior, they're horny films. Like there's people wearing skimpy outfits, screaming at each other, just sweaty and angry and lustful. Like that's horny. Witches of Eastwick is very horny because it's just these sexy women. Cher has never looked more beautiful. Susan Sarandon completely knows how to play the camp up in that situation. And Michelle Pfeiffer still virgining in her career. Beautiful, sexy, powerful women that you would spend your entire life trying to get with. And then Jack Nicholson just looking kind of like slick, sexy, and just fucking great. I mean, I've never been the biggest Nicholson supporter in terms of like sex appeal, but he's never looked sexier when you have people pining for him, and God, all these people are just so sexy together. We don't make modern films where everybody in the cast just looks like they could like jump on each other at any moment, just be so lustful and interesting, and just like lick butter off each other, you know? Like, I want modern films. Because every leading actor today is just so asexual, neutered, nothing coming out them, aromantic. It's just sometimes they'll get a big kiss, or they'll be like, look, modern film stars are very sexy people. You know, we have gorgeous people, ripped like motherfuckers, sitting in these roles, just doing great work, looking cute and pretty, and just having everyone in the audience go like, oh, they're so sexy and hot. But they're not horny. They're not like, you know, flirting with every person they see. They're not allowed to like actually crawl in bed with somebody and get water poured on them and have to like take off their top and everything like that. We don't let horniness come into our films anymore. Same with women. You know, I understand the need where it's like you can be a powerful woman without showing your body and being sexy, but this is a comedy and you have beautiful women in on the joke doing the work to make it funny. I'm just saying we need more films where it's like everybody in the cast, everybody behind the scenes is just like, this is too sexy and hot. Like, why are we all so interested in this? And it's kind of the thing, like, the modern, like, movie star doesn't have the Jack Nicholson energy of, like, hey, I could literally sleaze my way into anybody's pants. They don't have it. No, like, major movie star has that energy. We kind of lost it. I think the last film that had that energy was Mamma Mia, where everybody is just so drunk, so happy, just like we're screaming at each other, we're partying, we're having a good time. At any moment, anybody could kiss anybody. We don't have that energy in film anymore, and I want to see it. I miss it. So if you haven't seen Witches of Eastwick, it's incredibly horny, incredibly steamy, just beautiful women trying to get with Jack Nicholson and he's being the devil. It is so cool. One of my favorite films of this genre where it's like, yeah, look at these beautiful women. And they are beautiful. Big floppy 80s hair and all. Jack Nicholson with a little ponytail. You're watching sexy people be sexy. I love it. I love it. It's so cool. Oh, man, Witches of Eastwick. They could, I hate to like be like, they could never make that today, but they'd be too scared to make this today. Because it'd be too like, ooh, this is a little cheesy. This is like a Netflix original, but you gotta go for it, man. Let's go. And then he takes a break for a bit, and then in 92, he does Lorenzo's Oil, which is really weird. Like, my first introduction to Lorenzo's Oil was like the joke in Community. It's like, oh, obviously you haven't heard of Lorenzo's Oil. What a weird film. Back with Sarandon, giving her a great performance to work with. Here's the thing you need to know about Lorenzo's Oil. It is just like a, like a drama about a kid with a disease. ALD, I think is what it is. And the kid is pretty much just going to be like lost in himself, and his mind is going to be trapped in his body where he can't move or think or act anyway. And like, it's such like an intense subject matter that you're like, okay, the guy that made us the Horny Witches and the Horny Australian Outback is going to do like a drama about these two people, Nolte and Sarandon, trying to save their kid from this disease. And you're like, what? Why is that George Miller? Then you realize, oh, George Miller has a medical degree? And you're like, wait, what? He does? And you're like, he might know a little bit about medicine, and he knows how to make an insane film? And you're like, yeah. You're like, whoa, this is genuinely a brilliant piece of filmmaking. And again, it's like, this isn't the kind of film that gets like the big distribution release anymore, where Witches of Eastwick and Lorenzo's Oils are kind of like films we don't make anymore on like the big scale. But the fact that this guy whose first three films were Mad Max, and Mad Max said, I'm going to show you I can do more than just be the crazy BDSM guy where everyone's jumping off of cars and throwing Mel Gibson around. What about a really cool courtroom drama? Well, not courtroom, really cool hospital drama where everything's so intense and freaky and weird. Not a big hit. People have come around on it a little bit. And then for some reason, he's like, okay, I've tackled almost every genre I want to, but people don't know this about me. I want to make kids' films. So I'm going to show you the most insane kids film imaginable in Babe. And this is the first film on the list where he doesn't direct. There's a huge thing about it where his friend or like his kind of like his protege directs this film. It is directed by Chris Noonan or something. Yeah, you get it. It is written by George Miller and Chris Noonan. And the idea is, what if a little pig named Babe wanted to be a sheepdog, and then the farmer was like, oh shit, my pig is a sheepdog. That's Babe. That is the plot of Babe. But what if it talked? What if it had the voice of a rugrat and it just talked? And you're like, okay, I need a minute to think about this George, because you showed us that like you like doing the Mad Max weird stuff, okay? You're in the desert, everybody's crazy screaming in these stupid hockey pads. And then you're like, I can do that exact energy but for a kids movie. Because I'm serious, I will stand by this statement when we talk about Happy Feet and the next Babe. They are insane films. This first Babe is a little more toned down because, he didn't direct it, but you're like, okay, the pig wants to be a sheepdog. It gets entered into competitions. Everybody's making fun of the pig. Every animal's talking to him. It gives us James Cromwell giving the most like infamous line reading of all time. That'll do, pig. That'll do. What? Crazy. I love Babe. Babe and Babe Pig in the City are freaking awesome. And I'm going to talk about them more in depth on this channel, but Babe is such a twistedly good film. You're like, this is a concept that should suck. It should be hard to make, really stupid, but it does well for some reason, and it gets Oscar nominations. And you're like, what is this movie doing with Oscar nominations? It got nominated for Best Picture. You're like, this stupid film got nominated for Best Picture? The pig one? Not Road Warrior? You're like, the stupid pig movie got nominated for Best Picture? That is so dumb. And then he's like, okay, Newton's out. He's not directing the sequel. We made a lot of money. I'm directing the sequel. Guess what? It's Babe, Pig in the City. And if you thought we couldn't make this any weirder, guess what? Well, James Cromwell gets like hit by something in the beginning half. So Babe's got to go into the city with the woman farmer, and Babe's a girl. She gets lost, and what a fucked up movie. And this is the thing where it's like, it's aimed for kids, but I think I watched this too young, you know? He joins a gang of like rabid dogs that are living on the streets, kind of becomes like a punk. And then he gets in with like just monkeys living in apartments, you know, like chimps just living in apartments, and like they just wear clothes and shit. And you're like, I'm sorry? What's happening? What? It's like so bizarre. But there's something so brilliant about like its insanity, where it's again, you can't make this up. It's just so weird that it existed, and it's just like, yeah, okay, Babe, let's read it a little bit. I'm on the Wikipedia. A few weeks after the events of the first film, Babe inadvertently causes an accident while attempting to help Farmer Hockett repair the pump at the farm's well. Author sustains severe injuries, and wife Esme is tasked with tending the farm alone. Shortly afterwards, the bank needs money, blah, blah, blah. They have to go into the city of Metropolis. It's just every city rolled into one. It's got like stupid landmarks. It's crazy. So Esme gets lost in there, and then we see following him to the hotel, Babe meets a trio of chimpanzees, Bob, his wife Zudi, and his little brother Easy. Then Thelonious, a civilized Borean orangutan who is the butler for a landlady's elderly uncle. Fugly, his plan is to make the Babe because it's Mickey Rooney, isn't it? Mickey Rooney is like Fugly, and his plan is to make Babe part of the clown act he performs at the children's ward in the hospital. What? You're like, that? Who comes? Your first movie is just like, the pig wants to be a sheepdog. They're going to perform. The sheep aren't going to listen. People will laugh at him. I know. What if Mickey Rooney wants to steal the pig, make it a clown in his act when he performs at a children's hospital? And you're like, what? That is so stupid. That it's so insane, and I don't understand it. Like, how crazy is that? The celebration is interrupted when several unfriendly animal control officers are falsely altered in the violation of Flume's neighbors. Horntiss, who dislikes animals, most of the animals are removed except for Babe, Tug, Ferdinand, and a disabled Jack Russell named Fleelick. That's so dumb. And the movie also ends with like, that'll do, pig, that'll do. Like, it's just taking a pig into a city. It meets so many insane creatures, and then because like there's a dog that was drowning. You're like, oh, where's that line in here? Yeah, it's like it joins like the gang. There's a dog that's drowning, and then all the other animals are just like, why the fuck did you save him? And they just treat him like they just treat Babe like she's a savior, and you're like, what? It's so weird. And again, there's that George Miller thing. It's like, you think I'm gonna make a silly, dumb kids movie? Guess what? A dog's gonna drown, the pig's gonna save it, and everyone's gonna think the pig is a savior. That's fucked, man. That is so weird. And it's like, what if the Fugly just tries to perform at children's hospital, almost sets it on fire? I can't believe that. So that's 98. In 98, he makes Babe, Pig in the City. Doesn't do as good as the first Babe. He's like, screw you guys. That was a good kids movie. You didn't like it. Fine. In 2006, I'll give you something you're really gonna like. Happy Feet, baby. Oh my goodness. I remember seeing Happy Feet in theaters. It's one of those early films that I was still young, but I just remember like the experience of sitting there to watch it. And I think it messed me up because it is stupid and it looks bad. And like the penguins are too realistic. The plot is like, we all sing each other a heart song, and then One penguin wants to dance instead, but isn't like dancing just like evocative of music, and it's so dumb. And then like the movie has like this weird, really weird thing where it's just like, oh my goodness, it's so dumb. Like, oh, let's see if I can find it here, because because like, is his name Happy? No, his name's Mumble. He leaves and he's like, I don't want to be here. Well, he gets kidnapped, and then it's just like it becomes like this message about like overfishing, and then you're like, what? He just gets like trapped by humans, and people show up, and they're like really realistic humans, and you're like, what the fuck are you doing? This shouldn't be happening. And it becomes this really just stupid like, oh look, these penguins are gonna save overfishing. And you're like, what? Are they? It's so dumb and so weird. The realism really sucks. And then he's like, I know what kids want, Happy Feet too. And it's so bizarre. Like, I like Babe and Babe Pig in the City because I'm like, that is such a fun concept where I can have fun with it. But the Happy Feet just give me like a headache, but all the good kind of headache where I'm like, who let this get here? Who let this happen? I really don't think anybody should have let this happen because it's really crazy. And you're just like, oh yeah, Happy Feet too. It's like, is it about Mumble? Nah, it's about Mumble's son. You'd think it's the reverse, but it's kind of not. It just becomes this whole other concept that's really annoying. The thing people remember is Brad Pitt and Matt Damon as like Bill and Will the Krill, and it's like, why did you do that? So it was 1985 when he made his last Mad Max film. In between that, we have Horny Witches, Sarandon is the Dr. Oil Lady, Talking Pigs, Herding Sheep, Dancing Penguins who should be playing music, all this crap that he clearly doesn't want to make. And then comes 2015, where he said, I have been waiting desperately and patiently for any studio to let me redo Mad Max. I put in the time, I've put in the efforts, I want to do another Mad Max. Mel Gibson won't be back, everybody. We'll get a nice, friendly face like Tom Hardy, and I can guarantee you it's going to be worth your while. So, Road Warrior was a step up from Mad Max. Thunderdome may be on equal footing as the Road Warrior in terms of quality, makes a bunch of other stuff. And then he's like, Mad Max is my baby. Nobody else was allowed to touch it. I'm going to make my magnum opus, the greatest film of all time, my ultimate film, and he does. I've said it before. I will say it again. Mad Max Fury Road from 2015 might be the greatest film ever made. I honestly mean that because it's coming out in this time where you are starting to see the repetitive nature of the film industry and their franchises. So when somebody says, oh, another Mad Max, boo-hoo. Those were kind of fun in the 80s. Who gives a shit now? And then George Miller, who's like 60 when he makes, like 65 when he makes it, he's like, everyone shut the fuck up for a minute. Look what I can do when you give me the big budget, when we have today's technology. Great actors doing great shit, practical effects all over this freaking desert, man. And I'm going to give you the best looking, colorful film you've ever seen. Is there visual effects and CG in it? Yes, but it benefits the story, it benefits the characters. It's a great looking film. The colors shine. The acting is so superb. The minimalistic dialogue really makes it pop. And in an era when, you have bigger films beating it with just like uglier palettes and cleanses, you're just coming into Fury Road and you're like, oh my goodness, we used to make film. We used to try. We used to just like strap guys in stupid looking equipment and tie them to the side of a big truck playing a guitar that breathes fire. And we just send them down this stupid path of a bunch of women with guns. And we just strap Tom Hardy to the front of a car and we just send him in the shit. Like, we just made films, man. And you're just watching this beautiful magnum opus where it's like, it's Fury Road. If Fury Road had $100 million and was just on a bunch of cocaine, just this insane camera work, this beautiful lighting and these effects, and you're like, this is an auteur filmmaker coming into franchise work and being, everybody just step back, let me show you how you really make an action film, how you really make a franchise film, and then everything else that came out this year is obsolete in comparison. It is. You cannot put Fury Road on the same pedestal as any other film that came out this year. It got nominated for so many Oscars. It won a few. It changed the game. we haven't made anything quite like it since on that scale. It was beautiful. They made actual moving vehicles. They made the actors do cool shit. It was a film of films. And man, is it beautiful and sweeping and epic. And I don't have any recommendations for you guys today except to watch Mad Max Fury Road, because it is a film I want to talk about endlessly. And I do want to talk about like a little bit of story. I don't know if he's going to be listening to this video, because I went to see this with one of my friends when it first came out. We were young men, and it was kind of around the same time that a bigger Avengers film came out. And I just remember trying to contain my enjoyment of this film with somebody I knew clearly didn't understand what was happening. And when we went back to high school after that weekend, he actively told some of our other friends, like, I don't get it, it was kind of dumb and stupid, and it looked weird, and it's like crazy. And I'm like, that is the point. My goodness, like, we don't make films like this anymore. It is insanity. It is beautiful. It is creative. It is gut-wrenching. God, so cool. I love it, and just the intensity. It's hard to describe like that feeling of just like that manic, intense, gut-wrenching, thrilling action, and have it just be like, no, but it looks good and it's awesome and it works for the characters and the world. It's awesome. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up that George Miller also was close to making a Justice League film called Justice League Mortals. You can look up more research on that. Given his history in this time period, that would have been right after Babe and before Happy Feet. I think we would have got something completely fucked and awesome. I would have liked that, but Armie Hammer would have been Batman, and then we'd have to disown it today. So I guess we were happy in the long run. And then I should say that in 2024, currently filming is a Furiosa prequel movie. He's making another Furiosa thing because Charlize Theron crushed it. Anya Taylor-Joy, an actress I am mixed on, seems to be making another film. Awesome. A fifth installment of anything Mad Max is so cool. This is a filmmaker who I admire and adore, and he actually had a film come out this year at the time of this recording this weekend called 3,000 Years of Longing, and that is what you're going to hear right now. "3,000 Years of Longing." That's right, folks. I did not imagine we would see an original thing from George Miller that wasn't Mad Max. I didn't think he'd want to do it, if that makes sense. The guy is currently 77. At the time he's making this film, he's around 75 age. So, you know, do we really want to give him some steam for anything? Like, if he just wants to sit back and says, Furiosa is where I'm going to end my career, I think we can all support that. But no, in between two Mad Max films, he says, I got something I could dig up from the little, like the pile of scripts I might have worked on in the past. So let's make 3,000 Years of Longing. MGM said, yeah, do it, man. Let's see what you got. And guess what? We got a really interesting film. I am doing a whole video talking about George Miller films. At the time of this video, it will be coming out soon. And I think this guy's one of the most interesting filmmakers out there because he's always just been on the other side of the studio. He's just like, I can work for you or I couldn't. I don't care. I'm just going to make whatever the hell I want. You can't stop me. Even if you just want me to make a kid's film, it's going to make you cry because it's really weird. So when he's like, I've talked about insane people in the outback. I've talked about pigs doing weird shit in a city. I've talked about dancing penguins. Now it's time for me to do the thing I've never done in my career. That is genies and gin. And you're like, okay, I guess you haven't done that. Why do you want to? Interesting. So let's put it like this. 3,000 Years of Longing is going to be a film that is very divisive. I understand why anybody could watch this and be like, this was boring and drawn out. I never want to see this again. Or they could be like, wow, we don't make films like this anymore. I am somewhere in the middle. I agree with both of those things. Watching this film, my first thought was, oh, this is a filmmaker. Sometimes you watch like modern Zemeckis or anything with Spielberg, may be the wrong example. It's like modern directors and the craft is still there, but the filmmaker energy is kind of faded into obscurity because they've done so many films. With George Miller, you're just like, oh shit, This guy knows how to make you feel a lot of things at once, and there's so much going on in that aspect. I don't know how I really feel about this film because I want to see more films like it, if that makes sense. If every director was like, oh, we're going to copy this format, I would be okay with that. But a lot of stuff in this film, it's really weighty dialogue delivered with an audience expectation that's not there anymore. And I just think it loses itself kind of in the third act. But it's still very interesting. So this is a Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba-led film. The story is pretty much Tilda Swinton's a modern woman who has everything she wants, and she finds a magical lamp, genie, and guess what? We're going to go into the history of what happened to the djinn to get him to where he is. And it's kind of cool. I like that format. I think it works for this kind of a story because it's supposed to be like a cautionary tale. It plays itself off like this is like a fable or like an old story of folklore. It's like the genie will, I keep calling it a genie. The djinn will tell you his like story so you know what to wish for. You don't wish him to never have existed. You don't wish him to do this and that. You see that tale unfold. And that's kind of cool. Half the film is these two named actors in bathrobes sitting in a hotel room talking. The other half is just, look at this insane shit that we put Idris in the past. Here's some weird magical beings protecting the Queen of Sheba, and you're just like, what the hell? And then there's like this weird story with like these other like two brothers in this feuding war, and you're like, whoa, that's a lot. And then this genius woman with all these mathematical equations in her head who didn't really get the chance to be in the spotlight. And all of those sequences, they're so different but similar. You know, it's like George Miller is good at so many things. So one of the things he is fantastic at is just making the weirdest movie ever. But it's cohesive. And that's the thing. Like, there's a lot going on. And there's so many of these different things in like the background with the camera movements where you can't really like pinpoint an exact thing. But you understand like, oh, this is really well done, if that makes sense. Even if it's a lot going on, you can just sit back and be like, wow, this is cool. This is insane. Like, why aren't other things looking like this? Is the graphics the best? They're not the best, but I think the way the camera works, like the old-timey feel of just like the lighting and the costuming and the way we shoot from angles helps that. If that makes sense, where it's like, okay, it doesn't look the most expensive, but if you were to throw this on and tell me it was from like the 90s or 2000s, I could believe you and be impressed. And that's the other thing about this film. It very much feels like a script he wrote in like the 90s and 2000s and never got a chance to make. I like it though. I actually really like it. There's something very cool about that energy where it's just, yeah, this is the kind of movie that studios used to make as their big blockbusters, but we don't make them anymore like this. So it's like seeing this time capsule open up in real time in modern audiences, and that's where I think a lot of people aren't going to get to it, if that makes sense. You're going to see some people be like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. This is quality magic, timeless movie making. Other people are like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, this is so insane. Half of it, they're in a hotel room. The ending drags on for 30 minutes. Like, this is so weird and bizarre. And again, I'm in the middle because I love the filmmaking aspect of everything. It's on another level. Like, his cinematography is gorgeous. His directing is gorgeous. Everything looks great. The dialogue is so fascinating. I think it could have used another pass just to maybe tighten things up a bit. But it's also just kind of boring. And that sucks. But it's the kind of boring you're drawn to where you're like, I could watch this again, maybe get a new feeling from it and understand something new. It's just one of those experiences that you rarely get in film anymore where it's like, this 20 years ago might have been the biggest film we ever had. You know? It's so rare to see that anymore. But it's kind of exciting. So Tilda does good. Idris does good. The costuming is insane, like I said. It's a really weird piece. Where it kind of loses me is like the last 30 minutes because it has like 4 specific moments where you think it's cutting to the ending and then it fades black and pops back and you're like, oh, okay. That's a lot of time padding. But, you know, there's some weird fighting in here. There's some weird visuals in here. And it's kind of cool to see a film that is taking these chances again. Obviously, it's only George Miller that can make these things look the way they do. But it's very unique, and I do admire it for that. This is the type of film that you walk away from where you're like, oh, we're never going to do this again, are we? Because it's going to bomb. It is going to bomb, and that's a problem. And because it's going to bomb, studios are going to be like, okay, so nobody wants this. We tried it. Nobody wanted it. But kudos to him for making this thing. Anybody who can get Idris Elba shirtless for an entire movie with big pointy ears and one red streak in his beard, talking to these random people, screaming at this large woman like, you have to wish or we're all going to die, and then he ends up in the ocean and he turns... It's like, we don't do this anymore. It's cool. Kind of boring, but that's Hollywood in the late 90s, isn't it? Just a lot of good ideas that are executed bad. That's what this reminds me of, and that's kind of cool. For that aspect alone, I'm kind of excited about this film. Is it great? No. But it's interesting. I can guarantee you one thing about seeing this film. You're never going to see another film that looks like it again. It is the most unique filmmaking experience of the year, in my opinion, just in terms of like, wow, quality, but not great quality. So cool. It's just so 90s and 2000s. So I kind of admire it for that. It's kind of interesting that we made that film today. Pretty cool. Pretty interesting. Weird stuff. Good for you, George Miller. You're still doing the weirdest shit in the world, but we all admire you for it. So, 3,000 Years of Longing. I should also mention this is a rom-com in a way. It's a romantic film. So get behind the love story that's being presented because it's secretly horny and secretly romantic. That's exciting too, because guess what? We don't do romance or horniness in movies anymore, so that's another thing to look forward to. Just a horny shirtless Elba. So 3,000 Years of Longing, I am going to give a 6 out of 10. Now, thank you guys for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.